and just wasn't able to really engage it like I wanted to. Beyond sending out tweets and a few Instagram posts, but I was supposed to do some lives. And anyway,
All right, we're getting ready to start. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining me tonight at Pep Talk. Welcome to the living room. We've got a great conversation today. Let's do this intro. Welcome to Pep Talk, a frank conversation about the state of education. The disparities in our school discipline system, both nationally and here in Dallas, call attention to the need for change in our school culture. The use of zero tolerance practices and the over-disciplining of youth of color, specifically Black youth, have continued the flow of Black boys and girls into the school-to-prison pipeline. Our educational system spends vast amounts of money for security services and minuscule amounts comparatively on the mental and emotional well-being of our youth. Systemic racism, racist practices, and policies have impacted communities of color, but specifically Black communities, creating wealth and achievement gaps that spill into our school system. Implicit bias, a lack of cultural awareness, consistently criminalize Black student behavior while dismissing and minimizing the same behavior in other students. Zero tolerance policies and practices are proven not to change students' behavior, but increase aggression and disengage youth from the learning process. Learning is not one size fits all. Moving our educational culture from deficit thinking toward an whole child approach is the goal of PEP. And this week's show is entitled A Principal's Point of View, How to Make Schools Safe and Engaging. And our guest is author, CEO, all around, bad man, Desmond Williams. Desmond, please introduce yourself.
that was a lot right there. Batman. But hello, everyone who may be listening. My name is Desmond Williams. I'm a native of Detroit, Michigan. I live outside of Washington, D.C. I had the honor of attending Howard University in the District of Columbia, and then I began my teaching career in DC public schools. I have approximately 19 years of experience as an educator, being a special educator, a classroom teacher at the elementary level. I spent 2 years teaching middle school ELA/English, and I have another 5 years as a principal/assistant principal. So I'm most passionate. I tell people I'm most passionate about the education of Black boys. I started my career as a special educator in the hood, and that makes you a de facto teacher of boys. But I also spent the last 6 years of my school career in a school for boys. So I have a lot of experience teaching Black boys. I have a lot of theories and ideas. I also have a lot of expertise on what should happen for Black boys and Black children in general. Because make no mistake about it, our girls are under attack as well. So that's me in a nutshell. I'm a father. I think about that as I come to this work. I have 2 beautiful daughters, and I'm a husband, and my daughters and my wife are Black girls. So I bring that to this work as well. So thanks for having me, Brother Leon. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining me, man. I met this brother a few months ago at a conference, and he's changed my life. And I appreciate everything that you do for education and for youth in general, but particularly for Black youth. And we're going to jump right into this.
Okay.
And it's going to be real conversational, you guys. So please forgive us how we speak. And if you're not with it, that's okay too. We're here to learn and grow.
Always.
We're talking about school culture. You know, perception equals potential in the ASW is, and everyone right now is talking about the importance of culture, especially school culture, and how discipline affects kids, and the use of zero tolerance practices and all of these things. How important is culture and a principal's role in creating that culture in a school?
So culture is, I don't want to say everything, but culture is probably, culture permeates everything that happens within the school. It permeates how adults treat each other, how we solve problems, the systems that we put in place, how we think about efficiency, how we think about our overall values. Culture impacts everything. My belief is that it's the principal's job, um, and or the administrative team to be the cultural warriors for a building. I've done a lot of work with charter schools, and I've worked in a few charter schools where they purposefully will delineate that task to a dean of culture. But from my experience, that person ends up having more power than principals do. So from my perspective, the the task or the torch bearing, if you will, of how we do things has to come from the principal. And it is the most important thing in a school, because if you don't have the appropriate culture, there's a very strong likelihood that the emphasis on teaching and learning is not there. We're not treating each other correctly. We're not showing up to work on time. We're not running through the walls for children. We certainly are not running through the walls for adults. We're judging adults. We're judging parents. Uh, if our culture is not up to standard and if it's toxic. And in a best case scenario, when you have a culture that is well balanced and is there to support children, principals and many and oftentimes teachers do not have to do much to reinforce it. It operates on its own. And people who break the cultural norms of the building are self-checked and corrected throughout the organization. So you could be a new assistant principal at a school, and you're eating before the children eat, and the custodian will stop you saying, "We don't do that here." That's culture. It's how
Yes.
we do it's how we do everything, from the teaching and learning, how teachers treat each other, how students are treating each other, um, and then how we look at problems, how we go about solving problems, and what are the values that we espouse as an institution. And you don't have to say those values, they come out in actions. They come out in our actions.
Which is why we have, when we're talking about deficit thinking and punitive culture, it's the reason, and you said something that was really brilliant to me, when you said that it'll self-correct itself. Like it'll self-correct. And if you're out of line, so if you have teachers in a punitive culture or in a deficit thinking, which when we talk about deficit thinking, we're talking about kids, seeing kids, all the things that are wrong with kids, not seeing them from a strengths-based perspective. But
Right.
if a teacher stands out and fights for the kids or stands up for the rights, then again, like you said, they're against the culture and they will get self-corrected. So it
Mhm.
becomes hard for, if I'm understanding and making this correlation, it becomes hard for teachers um, and educators or even staff to go against what's kicking our kids out of school disproportionately.
My mentor taught me, Leon, that if no one acts against culture, it'll continue to operate as it's always operated. So someone or something, if you will, has to jump in and intervene often and with force to change culture. So let's take the example I gave of a new assistant principal at a school eating uh, during the lunch period before all of the children have gotten their food. if for whatever reason custodian saw that and said something, but the assistant principal didn't heed, then that could signal, right, to the other staff members there that maybe there's been a change in culture, right? Typically speaking, that won't happen. Another adult will step in and will say, we don't do that here. We don't do that here. However, it's little nicks like that over time, right? It's like smoking. Like if you smoke one cigarette, it's not going to kill you. If you smoke a second cigarette, it's not going to kill you. But over time, right, that catches up to you. And it's the same exact concept. So when we talk about discipline, the problem that a lot of schools have is discipline is something that's reactive. We think of discipline as how we get kids to do what we want to do, as opposed to thinking of discipline as part of teaching.
Showing them something. Yeah.
Yeah. So my children, they know we don't watch Frozen in our house. That's just not. We don't get down like that. In this house, it's the equivalent of pornography, right? And um, that's part of the culture that we have built here. So my children will know, um, even through associations that I don't necessarily create. They'll say, "Dad, can we can we watch that?" And I'll say, "Since you asked, you probably shouldn't watch it, right?" But I say that to say that everyone has to be invested in it to the degree that when that happens, I've been so proactive that everyone involved is also proactive. So when we have a situation where um, two students are fighting, right? It's not a big drain on the rest of the culture of the building to have to respond in a reactive way to what these two children just did, right? And when that happens, it's very easy to call their parents and to say, you guys are going to do X and Y, and then you're going to take your butts back to class. But when everyone is reactive, you have multiple students fighting and it becomes too much to handle. And then when Desmond and Leon get into a fight, we're going to send you home just like we sent everyone else home. And I know that's an oversimplification, but we have to look at discipline as teaching the expectations of what we want to happen, right? So I
Well,
tell
that's
my
actually what discipline means.
that's what
Discipline means to model. It
that
doesn't mean punishment.
yeah, it means doing what you're supposed to do when you are supposed to do it, and you model what you're supposed to do
Yes.
when you're supposed to do it. So when you do those things up front, you have situations where you don't. Hold on one second. What? What?
We in the house right now, so
What? Or go watch the movie. Go watch the movie.
it's okay. Look, last week the last one I had to get up and the dog was whining and had to go to the bathroom, so it's all good. We're in the living room.
Yeah.
So, and that's modeling. That's modeling right there. That's not yelling, screaming. That's modeling what discipline is supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
So,
So, and schools will ask, um, can you help us with restorative justice? Can you help us with a restorative model? And oftentimes you can't start there. You have to start with teacher mindset, because so much of what we think of discipline starts with, I've been disrespected and nothing is going to happen until she or he learns how to respect me. And it's really, and I used to think like that too as an educator. I grew up in the hood in Detroit. I grew up with a mother who she ain't take no mess. Everything was about respect. So I carried that to the classroom, right? You teach who you are. And I had to learn that, some of the things that I was seeing my kids do that I didn't want them to do, they were doing that with veteran teachers who had been teaching longer than I had been living. So I had to take myself out of the equation. Like when you talk about school discipline, it really starts with, do you have teachers who love and respect themselves? Because once you have that, it becomes easier to love and respect the families that you're serving. And then
Yes.
once you have that, I was having a conversation with some teachers in Harris County. I said, once you love your children, that's the beginning of differentiation. Like
That's DEI. Yes.
you see every student as an individual and not as a group of people who I'm going to teach to. And if they don't get it, oh well. If they could be high, they could be low. But if they don't get it, oh well. Like you have to see the humanity and the individuality in all students. And once you, I mean, that's 65 to 70% of the battle as a classroom teacher. And if we believe in our kids and if we have efficacy and believe in ourselves, it becomes so much easier because children will start to want to do the things that they ask them, not because they love Shakespeare or trigonometry or side angle side or all of the goofy stuff we ask kids to do.
Learn.
Start to
Not
do
even
those.
learn, to remember.
Yeah, they start to do those things because they respect and they love you, and that they know that you are invested in them. That's everything in building a classroom culture. Like what does mutual respect and love look like in our buildings? What
But
does
that
it look
only
like in
comes,
our classroom?
that can only be implemented from if your principal's doing that, correct?
Well, no, you can,
Okay.
because I've been in some situations where principals have been awful. They have been self-centered, they have been ineffective, and there are some classrooms within their building, right? They're pockets of greatness where
Okay.
you'll have kids wilding out all day until they go to seventh period with Miss Johnson. And Miss Johnson is loving on her kids, and the kid who's done nothing all day will go to his locker and get his materials before he goes to Miss Johnson. Your hope is that the principals do their part to make the other teachers look and feel like Miss Johnson, right? Because Miss Johnson might get out of the bed like that, but some people you gotta, right? You have to give them supports. Everyone is not gonna show up as uh, everybody's not gonna show up as Michael Jordan, right?
Okay.
But you can support them enough that you can still have a winning team, and kids don't feel the disconnect leaving Miss Johnson and going to Miss Tolliver and going to Mr. Bryant or whatever the case may be. That's the
Okay.
goal.
Okay. So then we're talking about, it can be done and replicated without the principal's lead, but it would be better if the principal was supporting the teachers and setting the culture.
Well, can it be replicated without the principal? That's another question. Can it exist in pockets? Yes. Can it
Okay.
be replicated without the principal? Very rarely. I mean, let's just go with the sports analogy. Um, and this may, some of our female audience may not follow this, but Doug Collins was a great coach, and the Bulls did a lot of great things with Doug Collins as a coach. But when Phil Jackson took over the team, he was already an assistant coach there. But when he took over the team, he changed the culture. The players didn't change, their skill sets didn't change, but the mentality and the values that he wanted them to invest in ultimately changed. So, can it happen without the appropriate leadership? No. The leadership 103 tells us it can, but you can see some of those things in pockets. But when things like that, when you have Miss Johnson in pockets, it's not sustainable, it's not consistent, and you ultimately have a situation where you're failing children because you can't be with Miss Johnson all day, right? Or if you're at the elementary level, this group of kids is with Miss Johnson all day, but what about the other fourth grade class? They're with Mr. Williams, and he's yelling at the kids, and he's threatening to choke kids, and he's got all of the parents' numbers on speed dial, right? He spends more time calling parents than he does actually um, instructing kids, right? Like that's his discipline. I'm gonna call your mother. I'm gonna just put her on speakerphone. She can listen, right? I've actually seen that. Like,
No, and
what?
I just finished an email where someone, an ED, executive director, was talking about her teaching experience, and that's the same. She mentioned the same thing, and it doesn't promote change or growth in either the students or the teacher. So
Yeah, we know what I think has happened, Leon, over the last X amount of years. I can't put a number on it. We know how to articulate the problem. We know what's wrong. We as African Americans or as African people, we don't need any more research on what needs to happen to better prepare our children. That articulation of the issues is, I mean, that evidence, that research is rock solid. What we don't have is the vehicle to do it. We just don't. Like I said, this is a burning house. And discipline, you can't have a system of white supremacy that doesn't pathologize Black children. You said you use the term coming from a deficit perspective, but I mean that is the history of African people in this country, right?
yes,
The way, part of the psychological manner in which slavery was justified was to say, African people are less than human. They don't have a culture. They don't have a history. They never had any civilization. Everything about them speaks to the need for them to be up under us so that we can culturally, uh, so that we can give them culture, so we can give them civilization. And that's the same thing that we see in our schools. I mean, I should know this, but I completely forgot. But one of the gentlemen that I quote or reference in the book talks about racist ideas in Europe that came to America um, long before the slave trade was abolished, long before slavery had ended. So you just don't get rid of those beliefs and those ideologies overnight. You just don't, and they permeate all aspects of human activity, as my um, spiritual mentor Neely Fuller says. It operates in all areas of human activity, particularly in education. So
well, and yes, I agree with that 100%. And so I started off calling you an author. And if you guys haven't read a book, if you're looking for a good book to read, all you educators, principals, the book is called The Burning House: How to Educate Black Children in Modern Times. And when I read this book, not only did it confirm the things that I believe, but it took me farther than what I expected it to do. So I'm
okay.
going to let you talk real quick about what the burning house is, what it means to be a firefighter, and then we're going to jump into that red pill, blue pill thing as to why
Okay.
we
Yeah, I
can't.
wore red on I wrote red on purpose. So um my last school experience, I was at an all boys school for 6 years. I started teaching there um, after being terminated from an assistant principalship in the district. So I took a huge pay cut and went and worked at a private Episcopal all boys school as a third grade teacher. And what I found was, after that 12 years of experience, excuse me, that 11 years of experience as an educator, I didn't really have solid answers on how to educate Black boys, right? I had some ideas, but I didn't really have answers. So the book is part a coming of age from the perspective of I didn't want teachers to have to undergo the pain of the journey that I undertook, because part of that pain is me being complicit in the destruction of our children. That was one. Two, I had gathered so much information and experience and expertise. I wanted to share it. Three, there has been a silencing, if you will, of Black intellectuals. And if you spend enough time on social media or in the Twitter's verse, you'll get access to Beverly Tatum and Dr. Goldie Muhammad and Dr. Chris Emden and a few other names that escape me right now. But there is a litany, Leon, there's a host of
Yes.
Black intellectual power from the 40s and the 50s and the 60s. And I tried to bring that to light because it's almost as if white academia and white publishing companies ignored that total body of research. And there's a gentleman by the name of Dr. Carr who, Greg Carr is a professor of African studies at Howard University. And one of the things he says is, echoing what I said earlier, Black people have always known how to educate their children. Our problem has been resources and fighting white supremacy in this country. So that was the third goal that I wanted to exercise in the book, was bringing voice, giving more voice to our ancestors, some people that we had completely forgotten, who were straight G's. It's like me and you are like, we're talking about Jordan, and then our grandparents are like, no, it's Bill Russell and Lou
Okay.
Alcindor and Wilt Chamberlain. And it's like, you got to,
Without the shoes and all of that, right?
yeah,
Flat foot.
you got to study Wilt Chamberlain and Kareem and Bill Russell and those types. And I think that
Ball
leads
stars
to,
on.
yeah, I think it leads to a much richer appreciation
Yes.
of um, what our people have done and what we continue to face. Because if we act as if Desmond Williams just wrote this great book and now is the time to act, you're not going to act correctly, because I'm not doing or saying anything that our ancestors and our people didn't do in the 70s and in the 50s and in the 60s, right? It's nothing different than what Booker T. Washington did when he
Right.
started I believe it's the Rosenberg schools. I might have the name wrong, but there's been plenty of fight and push amongst African Americans to start their own schools, to self-define and self-educate. But if we don't know that, then we can make the same mistakes that led to those school closures, if that makes sense. So, I try to be as practical as I could and give teachers practical tips, like you can do this tomorrow. But I also wanted to leave middle class Black people with a very distinct choice of deciding, what do we want education to look like for our children? Is it access to the middle class, or is it sustaining Black identity? Because you don't get to sustain Black identity in schools as they're constituted. And those could be public schools, those could be public charter schools, those could be private and independent schools. The goal is to assault Black identity.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I
So
know that was,
I'm gonna
I know
step
that was
into
a
that
long
red pill, blue pill. And then
yeah.
we're gonna come to we're gonna step into the red pill, blue pill, and then we'll go back to being a firefighter, what that actually means. I'm gonna let you explain that.
Yeah, because
And
I could connect those.
yes, I know you can. I know you can. That's why I love you, bro. You move how I move, and and you show me a way that I didn't know that we could do this thing. But you know, you and I have had conversations before about, you're trying to do this work and you're trying to make a change in the culture. That's why we talked about culture first when we started in the principal leading. And we talked, and you get frustrated because you said it perfectly. The Black middle class
Mhm.
trying to find this place, but losing Black identity, as like putting that first, right?
Mhm.
And we fall into that whole matrix thing, right? So
Mhm.
you can't be. When are you gonna put something on the line? To
Mhm.
me, that really when are you gonna do that? And I'm gonna let you explain it because you do it more eloquently than me. I'm a physical type person.
I think actually I know the part of it is the language we use. We use terms such as woke, and the term is problematic because the assumption is, well, not the assumption, logically, you're either woke or you're not woke.
Or you're not.
So to be woke means you get and completely understand and have wisdom about how everything works. And that's actually not true. Whereas the person who's, what do we say, unawake or sleep,
Yeah,
they
sleep would
don't
be it.
understand anything. So that
Mm.
binary, that term is binary by nature. And I think it's important for us, like when we were coming up, um, when we had this thing called conscious rap, it was consciousness, right? And that was an extension of the Black Power movement from the 60s and 70s.
Yes.
There was a conscious movement, and consciousness moves or acts along a spectrum where I am not where I was when I started writing that book in 2018, right? My goal when I started writing The Burning House, because I had just come so far, like my game was, I was like, you know what? I'm really smarter than all of y'all. Right? That was how I looked at it. It was like the day, if I could use a sports analogy, it's like the whatever day Serena was like, you know what? I'm better than Venus.
Right.
Venus is the number one player in the world. I think I'm the number one player in the world. However, like, how do you help people move from number 50 in the world to number 35 to number 20 to number 10 to number 5 to number 1? That's what I really wanted to do. But I wouldn't say Desmond was toxic to Black children early in his career, but he was complicit in the system. So again, talking about this notion of how systems of oppression work, we as Black people have to understand that we are rewarded for our compliance. But as we are rewarded for our compliance, we are still crushing. We have to be conscious that we're crushing people who look like us. Like that's just the inevitability of the system. So that being said, when you talk about a blue pill versus a red pill, right? Like, do I really want to know how deep this goes? Most people like the idea of being comfortably numb, as Led Zeppelin said. Most people feel as though if they have the trinkets of what middle class American life has to offer, then that is making it. And in other situations, I might be a little bit more judgmental. But again, I think of my old self in 2010 versus 2013 versus 2014. The problem becomes as we are on our journey when we don't listen to other people who are obviously willing to talk to us and willing to help us, that we completely dismiss. And that's the conservative movement. That is in the educational space, these quote unquote libertarians who say, oh no, we need more charter schools. It's like, come on.
It's
Um,
still the same system. That's
can you
it's
can you
still the
listen to
same system.
can you listen to what we say? Like education is about helping people self-define and solve their own problems. And if
Yes.
another group of white people with power start a school in your neighborhood, it could be markedly better than a public school, but that's not allowing you to self-define. which is why I go back to the point of what do African Americans want from education? And that's the idea of the red and the blue pill again. I just need my child to know how to read, write, and do some arithmetic so they can go to college and not and avoid poverty. And I think there's a way for us to have our liberation and avoid poverty. And that's ultimately what I think. But again, when you talk about what school can look like um, for Black people in this country, that's focused on liberation, that's focused on a Black agenda, that may send a swath of our people to college, but may have a swath of our people in other industries and other fields. It's very hard to get that across because, as Asa Hilliard says, Black people have been educated out of their African identity. And when he said that, um, that was a YouTube video. He actually, I'm pretty sure he was living in Atlanta at the time, but he was actually speaking at a church in Detroit when he said that. I was watching it on YouTube, and when he said that, I said, I paused it. I said, that ain't true. And I said, have Black people been educated out of their African identity? And I could not disagree with him. I just couldn't. So when you talk about the blue pill, the blue pill is what you get the first day of pre-K 4.
Yes.
And it's like if they give you the red pill, it's like everything that you've had before that, you gotta throw that up and then take this pill because they can't coexist.
You can't.
So it's actually a false equivalency because as soon as you step into that school, that's the blue pill. But you still have NBC, ABC, Disney, right? You still have People Magazine, dominant media in general, feeding imagery to our children every day. So there's little vitamins and minerals and nutrients attached to that blue pill that we ingest every single day. So it's like, what? I'm gonna take the red pill on purpose? Purpose? Right? It's like was his name Cypher? He said to Neo once he was on the ship, he said, I know what you're thinking, right? I know what you're thinking. I wish I had taken the
Right.
blue pill. Like you're gonna purposefully fight
Make
this.
life difficult. And
If
and and I think that's what we've gotten to, Desmond, because we're talking about we're talking about, and I'm really practical, I'm very practical, and we're talking about making it rough for yourself,
yeah.
right? Like you said, because we started off this whole conversation with this: the system is going to self-correct.
Mhm.
So if the system is going to self-correct and you pop that red pill, you're going to always be checked. You're going to always be kicked out, to pushed away, pushed to the side. And most people don't see that. That's not, everybody ain't built like that.
I could tell
And
I could talk so long about the pain of feeling that there was something wrong with me because I wanted things to be different. Even before my termination at this particular charter school, I was considered to be a maverick because, from my perspective, our schools were failing. And then you got to understand, Leon, when I came into leadership in education, it was at the beginning of that, what I call the neoliberal movement. Obama was in office. We had race to the top funds. Common Core state standards had just taken off. We were tying teacher and principal evaluations to state testing. Everything was in flux. And being part of the transition, it was kind of the only thing I had ever known, because earlier in my career as a teacher, it was just about learning how to be a good teacher. The politics of education was lost on me. But as I started looking at the politics of it, I said, "You guys, you guys believe in this? This doesn't this doesn't make any sense. Are you sure?" And they're looking at me like, "Come on, man, you the school leader." And I'm like, "Yeah, but I'm asking you what you think as a human being. You really gonna tie teacher pay to a test? We're gonna teach the test all year?" Our school, Leon, gave a contract. I'm naming names. We gave a contract to a company called ANET, which is Achievement Network. We were paying this organization as a school 30 grand a year to come in and give interim assessments to our children. This organization is still around, and they siphon money from public and public charter schools by helping them teach to the test. Teach for America, the New Teacher Project, Building Excellent Schools, they're all siphoning money out of our communities. And there has been, speaking of those organizations that I just mentioned, Building Excellent Schools, the New Teacher Project, Teach for America, ANET, we haven't seen any market difference in the performance of our children. But yet they're all multi-million dollar organizations, right? So what are we really talking about? Bill Gates personally grandfathered, I'm sorry, paternally shepherded the Common Core state standards into our homes, right? Like how does one man have that much power? This man is actually trying to block out the sun. Did you see that? Oh man. I'm like, wait, what?
Bro, I haven't had a chance to see.
You really want this red pill? I saw that last night. We should
Oh, I
bring that
need
up
to. We
right.
got to talk, then. When this is over, we need to talk.
They're talking about, and some of the science of it goes over my head, but essentially releasing chemicals into the air across the entire planet that would stop the rays of the sun for the sake of slowing down global warming, but it would cool the planet. And the scientists are saying this is not a good idea. They had a team of experts from Harvard. And granted, I'm watching this on Fox News. This is Tucker
Okay,
Carlson,
okay, okay.
who's a repudiated racist, saying, "We're not," right? This is Tucker Carlson. I can't believe I'm agreeing with this dude. He's saying, "We're not going to let him do that, are we?" And I felt like he was talking to me. I was like, "Tucker Carlson, we're not going to let him do that, are we?" Because then they flash to the scientists, and the scientists are saying, "Yeah, we don't really know what that's going to do, but it's not a good idea to cool the planet artificially." But they've
Yes,
been experimenting with our children. That's
yes.
what I'm trying to get us to see. They're experimenting with your children
It's
every
not even
day.
an experiment. It's not even an experiment, I don't think, Desmond. You know, we brought in something back in the 90s. It started with the, you know, over disciplining and linking um, prison complex to school, right? Like it really went
School to
into
prison
play.
pipeline,
And the
prison sexual
pipeline, and
complex.
then we switched rules. We took rules from the prison yard to schools,
Mhm,
right? And it was failing in the prison back then, because
mhm,
that back then when prisoners, and as an ex offender,
mhm,
you could get a job, you could come out with a skill. Now it's not anything. We got kids, and so we brought the same thing over to
mhm.
education, and we have kids not coming out with skills. It's
They
not
have
even
no
an
skills.
experiment,
They have
bro.
they have they have a useless knowledge. They have limited skills, and they are in need of a 4-year degree, which still is not a guarantee of gainful employment.
No,
But
no.
the again, the system, we use this term system. Well, we let me define these terms and let me know if I'm going on too far because I think this
No, because wait, hold on. We got 15 minutes, but I'm gonna take it over about 10. So you okay?
we when we say the system, what we're really saying is an educational institution, which is American education. All institutions are designed to um, perpetuate themselves. They are designed to perpetuate themselves so that they help the individuals within that society solve their problems so that they can procreate and reproduce. So when you talk about an educational system that was set up for white people, by definition, it is doing the job of perpetuating the life, the mores, the folkways, the values of white America. But the values of white America are rooted in white supremacy. So we often say this system is not for us. What we really mean to say is that this is a system designed to perpetuate white values, and some of white values are rooted, dare I say, all of white values in this country are rooted in white supremacy. And that's the fight where we're seeing now. There's literally a civil war amongst one side of white America saying, we don't want to be that, and another side of white America saying, this is who we are, this is what we were designed to be, and we're not changing that. People who don't like it, they can leave, go back to Africa. If our country's so bad, how come they keep crossing the border, right? That talk. So we got to define what we mean by the system, which is why I tried to break the book down to talk about these parts of racism in these separate rooms, right? Like, boom, this is what you do in a living room. This is what you do in a dining room. This is what happens in a bedroom, right? And all of those things work together to create this harmonious, um, insidious fire, and thinking that you can pour a bunch of money in it, you just gonna burn the money. You can't fix that with money. Come on, man. You know how much money we pump into schools? You can't fix
Yes.
that with a training on teaching teachers what the school to prison pipeline is. That's not, come on, man. We gotta be smarter. We gotta
Yes.
you gotta see that for what it is. Cause if you don't, you'll start thinking there's something wrong with you. Like, man, maybe I need more of my blue pill,
Right.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You'll go
Yeah.
crazy
And I've had several conversations with you about that blue pill. And
because there are people who are taking a blue pill and they're like, man, I think I'm going crazy because they're on the brink of saying, you know what, this should be a red pill. But that red pill, man, right? There's and then I'm gonna shut up. But Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, she was talking about. I got shadow banned on Twitter. I'm gonna have to fight Twitter, but she was talking about uh, the four choices that oppressed people have, and the first one is to just submit, right? The second is to to kind of know that you are being oppressed and to try to ward it off. The third is to resist, and the fourth is open conflict. And she said, I'm here to resist. I'm here to resist, and I might jump over to open conflict. But if they say, Francis, we're gonna kill you, she said, I probably would just jump back to three and resist.
okay.
And but she was speaking as an elder, right? That was probably in 2012, 13, a few years before her death. As a probably, I don't know how old Dr. Welsing was, but as I said, let's just say a 70-year-old woman. So no, I'm not going out there like in open conflict. I'm not
Yes.
doing that. But those are our choices. And as you move along the continuum, you have to give something up. You're giving something up at every point. And do people consciously want to give something up? Nope. It's the problem with people. with white liberals. They don't want to give anything up. I'm not mad at them. It's like, wait a
Me
minute.
either.
If we're talking about equality, do I have to give up my house? It's like, that's kind of a fair question white liberals should be asking themselves. And that's a crude example. But what does it mean when we talk about creating equality? Like, what does that look like? Um, so yeah.
So I'm gonna do this real quick. Um, so we're gonna pull this all back to, because the topic was a principal's point of view, how to make schools safe and engaging for Black youth. We talked about understanding that principals have the power to change the culture. They have the power to direct the culture or guide it.
Hmm.
They have the power to support teachers or in their growth. We know that DEI is not just like education, not a one size fits all. It's
Right.
not it's not 10 hours,
Hmm.
which means that principals need to set up a culture of change. It's going to take something so that the outliers do get kicked out.
Hmm.
Which, when if you change your culture from uh, deficit or punitive to something that's whole child centered or inclusive, then those that are not falling in line, they will be auto corrected. We
Hmm.
talked about understanding that it's not that if you're not teaching a whole a culturally relevant curriculum, then you're not really, your culture is not right. It's
Right.
not going to be inclusive. It's not going to do that. We talked about how taking this red pill and this blue pill, and that most people are taking the wrong pill
Hmm.
simply because they're not willing to give up or fight against something that which you can't blame them because they're being auto corrected to fall back into the system.
Hmm.
Tell me what, and then we talked about white supremacy. What does that all have to do with a principal's point of view on changing the culture, guiding the culture, and making it safe and engaging for Black youth? Give me
I
your
think it,
utopia.
I think it means that's a great question. It means I I delineate this difference, or these two buckets that educators have to fall in, not just principals but teachers as well, of understanding pedagogy and being masters of what it takes to educate children, but also understanding that education is a political act. And I think if you don't understand that education is a political act, then you look like I looked early in my career when it was just about you got to teach these kids how to read, right? And not necessarily knowing that your school gets $138 per child, but this school, which is just like yours in a different tax bracket, you're getting $215 per child per day. So I think it's understanding where you're situated as literally an unelected official. And that's the essence of firefighting. So much of what we have to do now as educators, Leon, is we have to fight to get control, community control of our schools. The opportunity hoarding, the racism, the lack of efficacy or transparency on behalf of school boards, state boards of education, cities, much like DC, that have chancellors that report directly to the mayor and cut out that layer of bureaucracy, if you will, of having a school board. Those layers are, to a large degree, where lots of decisions are made that impact our children every single day. And we can't even go into those meetings and say, you know what, we want to adopt new textbooks, right? I was explaining to some teachers, like, this is how we can politically engage outside of our classrooms, outside of our buildings. It's bigger than your union. you kind of got to know who the people are um, who the power players are that affect what happens in your school and within your school district, and that's bigger than your superintendent slash chancellor. So in terms of making schools safe for our children, it is, yes, making our schools safe, but giving our children the opportunity to self-define and self-correct and educate under a Black agenda. I think when you do those things, safety is not an issue, right? Like we're going to
Yes.
self-define, well, first we self-correct, we self-define, um, and then we self-determine under a Black agenda. And an agenda for Black education doesn't have to be monolithic. It wouldn't be, because we all see things very different.
It
But
can't be.
I think it would be powerful if there were 13 Black agendas for education. Oh well, like white
We have the
people,
same thing. We have that going on now.
yeah, white people in this country are not a monolith, but they figured out a way um, to educate their children that I actually believe is quite efficient. Despite what they may say about, some of the inadequacies of their schools, it's actually quite efficient. So the it doesn't have to be one agenda, but I think that is the beginning. Like when you take care of that high arching political item, that's going to trickle down, and safety is not as big of an issue. Students being suspended is not of a big of an issue, because what's happening up here by definition is an act of love. Like if you're going to self-define yourself, that's one of the biggest things you can do. It's one of the most
Yes.
important things you can do. Like
And
I'm
we
not
have examples of that too. We have examples of
oh yeah.
schools that are doing it, plenty of examples, and they
Mhm,
do it well. They
mhm.
do it well. And it's
Yeah,
education.
yeah, it's literally when I was working at the Bishop Walker School, I said to myself, um, I'm going to hire as many Black men as possible, and I'm going to turn this into a demonstration school, a school that demonstrates how you can educate Black boys. And we didn't have problems with suspensions. Matter of fact, I had a kid went on a field trip. It was the end of the year. It was after Memorial Day. The end of the year, the kids went on a field trip. We never had problems with cell phones, but we collected cell phones, right, Leon? And the kids asked, "Oh, Mr. Williams, can we take our?" They were like, "Oh, Mr. Bryce, can we take our phones on a field trip?" So the teacher, he asked me. I was like, "Yeah, let them take pictures." Blah 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 blah. Anyway, we had a kid who was looking at some unsavory things on his computer, and I decided to suspend him. His mother came up to the school. She's like, "You're suspending my child? That's a school to prison pipeline." I was like, "Lady, get out of here. There's no school to prison pipeline." I was like, "It's the end of the year. Your child graduates in 2 weeks. We have used, let me get my life straight, two suspend 5 days of suspension on two suspensions. You don't get to come in here and say, I'm setting up your child to go to prison. Your child is in great shape,
Okay.
and he's probably going to continue to be in great shape, but because of the egregiousness of his offense, he's going to get suspended. But Mrs. Williams, that's a lady, this is about disenfranchisement. Your son is not disenfranchised,
No,
right? He's
no.
not. He's so again, but we defined all of that up here. So in her heart of hearts, she wanted her son to be in school because she wanted her son to be in school. But she didn't really have a, she was on shaky ground arguing that a Black man suspending her son was setting them up for prison when we had only suspended two kids in like 171 days of school. It's like, come on, lady.
Yeah,
Like, come on.
yeah.
Like, I love
And
you.
that's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
And so we're talking about suspensions too. We're fighting that now. And that's a big thing in Dallas. Dallas wants to be the first. But I think that's what we're failing to do, is that we're not looking at the fact that it needs to be a culture shift. It needs to come, like you said, from the top, and it needs to be an inclusiveness. The fact that she even knew that she could come up to the school,
Mm-hmm.
like that speaks in itself that there's a relationship built,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And I
that's how
think,
she was trying to play me. Like, I know Mr. Williams, we got a
yeah,
relationship. I
yeah,
just
and
read
that's
about the school to prison
right,
pipeline.
right. But then that's the thing I'm saying, is like, so we have, if we're gonna do this, it needs to have, you have to build that relationship. And
Mm-hmm.
that relationship only comes with uh building trust and talking and having an understanding.
Yeah,
So
I read about Dallas's initiative, and that's a tough situation. I think you have to phase that in, um, I, because I do believe. So let me sound like a black conservative for a minute. I remember I was this was my first principalship, and um, it was like one of the most telling interviews ever. It was after Obama had been elected, and George Bush was being interviewed on 60 Minutes, and he was being asked to reflect on his presidency. Right, that he's in his lame duck stage before Obama takes office, and he was being asked about um, the war, and he said, it's important. Um, Nobody wants to go to war, and no, we certainly don't want to use nuclear weapons. But he said nuclear weapons have a way of bringing people to the table, and I feel the same way about suspension. I've never in my career, um, and I got some flack for this on a podcast. I've never in my career uh, told parents that we don't suspend kids. Um, because when I call you, I need you to pick up the phone. Like, I need you to come to the table. Like, I'm busy and there are 300 other children in this building. So the goal was never to suspend children. Um, the goal was to teach children and to get them to change their behavior. And sometimes that was calling grandmother. Like, don't call mom because she busy. She'll forget. But grandma's a different story. So, you know, it there's tons of data that says that suspend out of school suspension doesn't work for children. But we know anecdotally, because we know our families and we know our children and we know our children's family situations, that there's some kids in your building when they do something egregious and they have been kind of towing the line, suspension could be a good thing. But in and of itself, what you're trying to do is to get the kid to learn from the mistake, teach them what the replacement behaviors are, right? So you kick Jason. What are you going to do next time when you feel that emotional? Like, you got to help the kid know where he was at that moment, how he was feeling, what his trigger was, and give him some um, tools to act differently in that situation. And then you say, okay, these are going to be I've taught you these are the consequences. And once we levy the consequences, we want the consequences to fit the infraction, but we also want it to be part of the teaching, right? So, like I said, my last year, um, actually those 2 years as an administrator, I think we used um, it was three suspensions and 8 days total. But I was never of the mind to tell parents, yeah, we're not gonna suspend your kid. But I could have easily that next year, we probably could have went without suspending anyone. Like, in my experience has been, the speaking of culture, most of the infractions come from your youngest children, the kids who are trying to figure out what is the culture. How do we act here? Which is why your pre-K4, your kindergarten teachers have to be, I mean, they have to be your ace pitchers. But not to belabor the point, when the relationships are there, you feel guilty suspending kids. I'll tell you that. Like it's like, oh, we're not gonna suspend him. We pulled the fire alarm. It's like, he pulled the fire
And,
alarm? Like that never happened. That's one of
but
those.
then that's not just a one-off situation. So
Yeah,
that's what we're talking.
that's one of those tough ones. But again, when the relationships are there, there's some emotion in fixing and healing the situation. And I've been in, part of my experience has been the situation is fixed before I even get the parent on the phone. So it's like I gotta call the parent because this is not something that we can just keep in house. But you feel as though as a community that you're moving towards healing, which is ultimately what you want from a community perspective. And then the conversation with the parties involved around, what are the replacement behaviors that we want to see from you? Like, what is best case scenario when that happens again? Because this is part of worst case scenario. Like, what's the best case scenario when it happens again?
And treating kids like they understand.
Yeah.
That's yes, yes. Well, 7, 8. Give me 2 minutes. Give me a shout out. What you're doing next? What's going on? What you got coming up?
I'm coming to
Do your
Texas.
plugs. Do your plugs, man.
I'm coming to Texas. I am in the process of filling out some work that I'm going to be doing with San Antonio Independent School District. I'm excited about that. I was just in the Harris County Day of Innovation of Learning. That was this past Saturday. And I will say, you Texas educators are on fire. I will say that. But I'm actually in the midst of completing an equity audit for a small Quaker school here in DC, along with another equity audit for a Catholic school that I have a contract with. But we'll be doing some work in Harris County this summer, working with a few principals, and looking forward to connecting with a good sister down there named Dr. Dana Ariola, to doing some more work with Aldine. So um, I will be in Texas is my point. As a matter of fact, one of my former teachers, I can't remember the school he teaches at in Dallas, but I'm participating in their career day tomorrow morning. So
Nice.
some things on tap. We're kind of ending this year and getting prepared for next fall. But I start my PhD work at Howard. Shout out to HU this coming fall. I'll be pursuing my PhD in educational psychology.
Nice.
I am or putting the finishing touches on a field guide to the Burning House, and also putting out a second edition of the Burning House, Educating Black Boys in Modern America. I'll be adding a new chapter on what families can do beyond sending their children to school. So, we're looking at homeschooling, we're looking at homeschool co-ops, we're looking at African-centered schools that have a curriculum that's about building Black identity. So there'll be that chapter, but also the field guide. And the goal is to have those ready. Actually, they are ready. The goal is to release them between June 15th and July 1st. So
Nice.
teachers can have them, boom, ready as they walk out the door to kind of self-pace some professional development over the
Nice.
summer. So those are a few things I have on tap. But for schools who are interested in having a thought partner, or want to talk more about anything I mentioned, just give me a call. I'd love to be a thought partner. If I need to come down there and we can roll up our sleeves, I always have my sleeves up. We can we can do some work to help make the world a better place for our children, because they deserve it.
Yes, they do. Thank you for joining me today. Thank you, Desmond Williams. You guys, thank you for staying over if you did. And this is Pep Talks, and we will see you in a couple of weeks. And thank you for joining.
One more
Yes.
shameless plug to connect with me. Find me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Clubhouse at Nylinka. That's NYLINKA. NYLINKA. You can purchase the Burning House on my Nylinka website. You can go to the products tab. If you're an Amazon person, you can always purchase it off of Amazon. But again, the book is entitled The Burning House: Educating Black Boys in Modern America. And you can get my contact information off of the website. Yeah.
Thank you. Perfect. You have a wonderful night, sir. Thank you guys for joining us, and look forward to the next episode. Have a good night.
Y'all come take this red pill, okay? It's all good over here. It's all good.
It's good for you, baby. It's good for you. You
All
have
right.
a good one, man. All right. Bye.